China is the largest country in the world with 1.4 billion people. This means that nearly 1 in every 5 people on Earth live somewhere in China. This is a huge market. So when the Chinese government passes a law, companies had better pay attention. And they are. In August, China passed their strictest online privacy law ever. The top legislative body in China, the National People's Congress, passed a new data privacy law on August 20th. It puts new limits on how tech companies can collect the personal data of their users. This is their latest strategy in their ongoing effort to make more restrictions on how American tech companies can work in their country. Some see this law as being a retaliation for American scrutiny of Chinese companies in America. TikTok, which is owned by China, was banned by Trump and then subsequently unbanned by Biden. What is the Personal Information Protection Law? Xinhua News Agency, which is run by the Chinese government, reported that the Standing Committee of China's National People's Congress passed the Personal Information Protection Law. It officially went into effect last November 1st. The Personal Information Protection Law, which is sort of like the General Data Protection Regulation that the European Union has, is going to be a big deal for tech companies. It says that tech companies must have some sort of valid interest in obtaining personal information if they're going to collect it. This obviously implies that tech companies collect data for reasons which aren't valid. The new law also says that tech companies can only actually use the data in a way that is restricted to the minimum scope necessary to achieve the goals of handling. Unlike Europe and China, the United States does not have any such law in place. This law also includes a rule that requires companies to get every individual user's consent in order to collect any personal information at all. There are also special guidelines for how personal information can be sent and used outside of China. This new law also affects facial recognition cameras. If they're being used for security in urban residential compounds and other areas, they can only be used for public security. They also must have display alerts that can be seen by members of the public. So basically, if you have a facial recognition camera, the only thing you can use it for is security, and people have to be able to see the camera. You're not allowed to just collect people's faces for whatever other weird reason you may have. China is taking the enforcement of this law pretty seriously, too. The potential punishments you can get hit with for breaking this new law include fines of up to $7.7 million, or 5% of your company's income. 5% of the income of some of these tech companies could be a massive amount of money. If I had to guess, I'd say it would probably be more than any ticket you've ever gotten from the government. The Personal Information Protection Law is really just Part 1. Part 2 is the Data Security Law. Now, the Data Security Law is a list of rules for how companies have to categorize the data they get from users. The categories are based on different factors like economic value and how important that data happens to be to China's national security. The law goes beyond just setting up privacy rights for Chinese electronic consumers. It also gives citizens the right to access, correct, know about, and even delete their personal information from the hands of tech companies. It also gives them the right to data portability, the right to restrict processing, and some rights related to automated decision-making with their data. They'll be able to withdraw their consent at a later time and file complaints against tech companies with the state. Tech companies are supposedly obligated to create user-friendly mechanisms for Chinese consumers to do all of these things. Whether or not they will actually happen remains to be seen, but the law is definitely ambitious in scale. Personal data in China. So who does this new law really apply to? Well, pretty much everyone. It applies to any entity doing business in China, But that isn't all. It also applies to any entity that does its business completely outside of China, but that also processes the personal information that belongs to people in China. If a business outside China uses the personal info of a Chinese user to better sell stuff to that person, the law applies. If the company or think tank or whomever is using the data for some sort of analysis outside of business, the law still applies. The only group where the law doesn't apply, of course, is the Chinese government itself. They are free to do whatever they want with the vast amount of data they collect with their 1984-esque mass surveillance system. The Chinese government uses this mass surveillance to maintain the social credit system. This is a national blacklist that came into full effect in 2018, and there's a long list of things that can lower your score if you're spotted doing them by a government camera, all of which have facial recognition and are run by artificial intelligence. The social credit system. In Beijing, eating on a train can affect your social credit score. If your score dips too low, you can be banned from all public transportation and your rating will become available for everyone to see. In Shanghai, if you don't put your trash into the right bin, that could lower your score and you'll have to pay a fine. So you better figure out if that thing your package came in is recyclable or not. If you don't visit your grandparents enough, they can sue you. If they win and the government decides that, yes, you have not been visiting your grandparents enough, that will impact your score, so you'd better head over to grandma's. In Shenzhen, if a camera catches you jaywalking, your score will be lowered. If someone under the age of 14 jaywalks, their parents will have to take special education courses or even do community service. If they don't, then their social credit score goes down. The city of Suzhou may have the strangest and strictest rules. If you're caught cheating at online video games, that hurts your score. If you make a reservation at a restaurant or order pickup but don't show up, your score might go down. I'm sure restaurants would love this, but I can't imagine any law like this flying in the United States. It's worth wondering why China is concerned about digital privacy when they obviously violate their own citizens' privacy on a very personal level every day. Could it be that they don't want any competition? Do they see these companies as potentially trying to influence China in a negative way? When it comes to the motivations of the Chinese government, ultimately, no outsiders know for sure. They're not exactly going to just come out and explain to the UN what they're really up to. Privacy law and tech companies. Over the course of the past year, the Chinese government has been passing more legislation like the Personal Information Protection Law. Restrictions and penalties for foreign tech companies are expanding. They've accused these companies of online fraud, data theft, and anti-competitive practices. So, essentially, all the same things that everyone accuses China of doing all the time. In July, China's State Administration for Market Regulation said that it had fined 22 different companies for monopolistic activity. However, they weren't all foreign companies. 6 were owned by Alibaba Group, a Chinese company, and 5 were owned by Tencent Holding, another Chinese conglomerate. Alibaba has previously been fined $2.8 billion by the Chinese government. An investigation discovered that they had been limiting the sale of certain products on other websites. So, what does this mean for foreign companies that want to do business in China? The world of data privacy is becoming increasingly complicated. You've probably noticed this due to the seemingly endless array of pop-ups asking about cookies that appear whenever you go on a website. Companies will likely have to update their privacy policies to reflect all of the specific requirements that China is laying down.